when poor college student Jake Martinez agreed to pretend to be the boyfriend of millionaire heiress Emma Whitman for one night. He thought it would be easy money to pay for his tuition. But what happened at her family's exclusive gala would expose the darkest secrets of Dallas high society and change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the story. It was a scorching August evening in Dallas, Texas, when Jake Martinez received the most unusual job offer of his 22-year-old life. He was working his third job of the day, bussing tables at an upscale restaurant in Deep Ellum, when a stunningly beautiful blonde woman in a designer dress approached him with a proposition that seemed too good to be true. "Excuse me," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "My name is Emma Whitman. I need to hire someone to pretend to be my boyfriend for one evening, and I'm willing to pay $10,000 for approximately 4 hours of work." Jake nearly dropped the stack of dirty plates he was carrying. $10,000 was more money than he made in 6 months, working 3 different minimum wage jobs while trying to put himself through college at the University of Texas at Dallas. His family had immigrated from Mexico when he was 12 years old, and he had been working since he was 14 to help support his parents and younger siblings while pursuing his dream of becoming an engineer. "I'm sorry, what?" Jake stammered, certain he had misheard her offer. "I need someone to accompany me to my family's charity gala tomorrow night. Someone who won't ask questions, won't get attached, and who understands that this is purely a business arrangement. You'd need to wear a tuxedo, dance a few times, make polite conversation, and convince everyone that we're in a relationship. That's it." But he had no idea what he was walking into. Emma Whitman was the 24-year-old daughter of oil tycoon Charles Whitman, whose family fortune was estimated at over $800 million. The Whitman name was synonymous with Dallas high society, philanthropy, and political influence that extended from Texas state politics all the way to Washington, D.C. Emma had grown up in a world of private jets, exclusive country clubs, and social events where a single conversation could determine the fate of multi-million-dollar business deals. But beneath her perfectly polished exterior, Emma was hiding secrets that could destroy her family's reputation and her own future if they were ever revealed. The charity gala was being held to celebrate her engagement to Bradley Ashford III, the heir to another prominent Dallas oil fortune, and the event was expected to be attended by over 500 of Texas's most powerful and influential people. The problem was that Emma wasn't actually in love with Bradley, had never been in love with Bradley, and was being pressured into the engagement by her father as part of a business merger that would combine their 2 family empires into the largest independent oil company in Texas. "Why do you need a fake boyfriend if you're engaged?" Jake asked, his curiosity overriding his confusion about the bizarre situation. "Because I need my fiancé to think I'm cheating on him," Emma replied with a desperation that seemed completely at odds with her wealthy, privileged appearance. "I need him to break off our engagement, but in a way that makes it look like it was his decision rather than mine." The desperation that drove her to extremes. Emma quickly explained that she had tried everything she could think of to get out of the arranged engagement without directly defying her father, whose approval and financial support she desperately needed to maintain her independence and pursue her own career goals. She had been accepted to Harvard Law School and planned to become a civil rights attorney, but her father had threatened to cut off all financial support if she didn't marry Bradley and take her place in Dallas society as the wife of a prominent businessman. "My father controls my trust fund until I turn 30, Emma explained, her voice tight with frustration and fear. "If he cuts me off financially, I won't be able to afford law school, and I'll be trapped in this world forever. But if Bradley breaks up with me because he thinks I'm unfaithful, my father can't blame me for the failed engagement, and I might be able to convince him to let me pursue my own path." Jake studied Emma's face, trying to understand why someone with her wealth and privilege would need to resort to such an elaborate deception. But he could see genuine desperation in her eyes, and despite the strangeness of the situation, he found himself believing that she was in real trouble and needed help. "What exactly would I need to do?" he asked. "Just act like you're my boyfriend. Hold my hand, dance with me, look at me like you care about me. At some point during the evening, Bradley will see us together and hopefully get jealous enough to call off the engagement. The transformation that changed everything. The next evening, Jake found himself in a luxury hotel suite in downtown Dallas, being fitted for a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than his family's monthly rent. Emma had hired a stylist to help him look the part of someone who belonged at a high society charity gala, and the transformation was remarkable. When Jake looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. The expensive tuxedo fit him perfectly, his hair had been professionally styled, and he looked like he could have been born into the same world of wealth and privilege that Emma inhabited. "You look perfect," Emma said as she entered the room wearing a stunning red evening gown that probably cost more than Jake's tuition for an entire semester. "No one will question that you belong at this event." But as they rode in Emma's Mercedes to the gala venue, Jake began to feel increasingly nervous about what he had agreed to do. He had never been around truly wealthy people before, and he was terrified that his working-class background would somehow show through his expensive disguise. "What if someone asks me about my family or my job or where I went to school?" Jake asked anxiously. "Just be vague," Emma advised. "Tell people you're in business or that you're between projects. Rich people love talking about themselves, so if you ask them questions about their lives, they probably won't spend much time focusing on yours." The gala that would change everything. The Whitman family charity gala was being held at the most exclusive country club in Dallas, a sprawling estate that looked like something from a movie about Southern aristocracy. The circular driveway was filled with Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and other luxury cars that Jake had only seen in magazines, and the guest list included oil executives, politicians, celebrities, and other members of Texas's elite society. As Jake and Emma walked into the main ballroom, he was overwhelmed by the opulence that surrounded them. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. The walls were decorated with original paintings worth millions of dollars, and every detail from the flowers to the silverware had been chosen to project an image of ultimate sophistication and wealth. "Remember," Emma whispered as they approached the receiving line where her parents were greeting guests, "we've been dating for 6 months, we met at a friend's party, and you're completely devoted to me." Jake nodded nervously as they approached Charles Whitman, a tall, imposing man in his mid-50s who radiated the kind of confidence and authority that came from controlling vast amounts of money and wielding significant political power. "Emma, darling," Charles said, embracing his daughter before turning his attention to Jake with obvious curiosity. "And who is this young man?" "Daddy, I'd like you to meet Jake. We've been seeing each other for a while now." Charles Whitman's eyes narrowed as he studied Jake's face, and Jake had the uncomfortable feeling that Emma's father was trying to determine his net worth and social status through visual inspection alone. "The introduction that raised suspicions?" "Jake what?" Charles asked pointedly. "What's your last name, son?" "Martinez," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite his growing nervousness. "Martinez," Charles repeated, his tone suggesting that he found something unsatisfactory about Jake's surname. "And what business are you in, Mr. Martinez?" Jake glanced at Emma, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I'm involved in several different ventures, sir. Import-export, some real estate development, various investment opportunities." It wasn't technically a lie. Jake did work for a moving company that transported goods, and he had once helped his uncle repair a rental property, but he could see that Charles Whitman wasn't entirely convinced by his vague answers. "How interesting," Charles said coolly. "Emma has never mentioned you before. I'm surprised she's been keeping such an important relationship secret from her family." Before Jake could respond, a new voice interrupted their conversation. "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" Jake turned to see a tall, well-built man in his mid-20s approaching them with an expression of barely controlled anger. Everything about him, from his perfectly styled blonde hair to his expensive watch to his confident posture, screamed old money and aristocratic breeding. "Bradley," Emma said nervously, "I'd like you to meet Jake Martinez." "Jake, this is Bradley Ashford." The confrontation that everyone feared. Bradley Ashford III looked Jake up and down with obvious contempt and suspicion. As the heir to one of Texas's oldest and wealthiest families, Bradley was accustomed to getting everything he wanted, and he clearly didn't appreciate finding his fiancée with another man at their engagement celebration. "So you're Emma's friend," Bradley said, the word friend dripping with sarcasm and disdain. "How exactly do you two know each other?" "We met through mutual acquaintances," Jake replied, trying to project more confidence than he actually felt. "Emma and I have been spending quite a bit of time together recently." "Really?" Bradley's voice was getting louder, and other guests were beginning to notice the tension between the three young people. "That's interesting, because Emma and I are engaged to be married. Perhaps she forgot to mention that detail when you two were spending time together." Emma stepped closer to Jake and took his arm possessively. "Bradley, Jake and I are in love. I'm sorry if that's difficult for you to hear, but I can't pretend to feel something I don't feel just to make other people comfortable." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jake could see that other guests were beginning to gather around them, sensing that they were about to witness a major social scandal. The scene that shocked high society. "In love?" Bradley's voice rose to a shout that could be heard throughout the ballroom. "Emma, you're wearing my engagement ring. We're supposed to be announcing our wedding date tonight." "I'm sorry, Bradley," Emma said, slipping the enormous diamond ring off her finger and holding it out to him. "I can't marry you. I don't love you, and I don't want to spend my life pretending to be someone I'm not." The crowd around them gasped audibly. In the world of Dallas high society, breaking an engagement at a public event was the kind of scandal that would be talked about for years. Bradley's face turned red with humiliation and rage. "You're making a huge mistake, Emma. And you," he turned to Jake with pure hatred in his eyes, "have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "Actually," said a new voice from behind them, "I think Mr. Martinez knows exactly what he's getting into." Everyone turned to see Charles Whitman approaching with several other men in expensive suits. Jake's heart sank as he realized that Emma's father had somehow discovered the truth about their arrangement. For the revelation that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles Whitman announced in a voice loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear, "I'd like everyone to meet Jake Martinez, a busboy from Deep Ellum who was hired by my daughter to pretend to be her boyfriend in order to break up her engagement to Bradley Ashford." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Jake felt like he was going to be sick as he realized that his deception had been exposed in front of hundreds of Dallas's most powerful people. "That's right," Charles continued, clearly enjoying the humiliation he was inflicting on both his daughter and Jake. "My daughter paid this working-class boy $10,000 to pose as her boyfriend and ruin one of the most important social events of the year." Emma grabbed Jake's hand desperately. "Jake, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen," but Charles Whitman wasn't finished destroying them both. "Mr. Martinez, perhaps you'd like to tell everyone about your real job, about your family's immigration status, about the 3 different restaurants where you bus tables and wash dishes?" Jake felt his face burning with shame and humiliation. Every person in the ballroom was staring at him like he was some kind of criminal or con artist who had infiltrated their exclusive world under false pretenses. The speech that surprised everyone. But instead of running away or making excuses, Jake surprised everyone in the room, including himself, by stepping forward and speaking clearly and confidently despite his embarrassment. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Whitman. I am a busboy. I work 3 different jobs to pay for college and help support my family. My parents are immigrants from Mexico who came to this country with nothing and worked incredibly hard to give their children opportunities for a better life." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. "Emma did hire me to pretend to be her boyfriend tonight, but what she didn't tell me was why she felt desperate enough to pay a stranger to help her escape an engagement to a man she didn't love." Jake turned to face the crowd of wealthy, powerful people who were looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Your daughter isn't rebelling against your family or trying to embarrass you, Mr. Whitman. She's trying to escape a system that treats women like property to be traded between families for business purposes. She's trying to pursue her own dreams and ambitions instead of being forced into a marriage that would make her miserable for the rest of her life." The truth that stunned the crowd. Emma stared at Jake in amazement, unable to believe that this young man she had met just 2 days ago was defending her in front of her father and all of Dallas high society. Emma is brilliant, Jake continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. She was accepted to Harvard Law School, and she wants to use her education and privileges to help people who don't have the advantages she was born with. But instead of being proud of her achievements and ambitions, you're trying to force her into a marriage that would waste her talents and destroy her dreams. Charles Whitman's face was purple with rage. How dare you speak to me that way? Security! Get this boy out of here immediately! But before security could reach them, Emma stepped forward and took Jake's hand. No, she said firmly. Jake is right about everything. I won't marry Bradley, I won't let you control my life anymore, and I won't apologize for wanting more than just being someone's trophy wife. She turned to face the crowd of guests who had been expecting to celebrate her engagement, but had instead witnessed its spectacular collapse. I'm going to Harvard Law School in the fall, and I'm going to become an attorney whether my family supports me or not. And Jake Martinez has more integrity and courage than anyone else in this room. The kiss that sealed their fate. Without warning, Emma stood on her tiptoes and kissed Jake passionately in front of the entire ballroom full of shocked guests. It wasn't part of their arrangement, wasn't part of the plan to break up her engagement, but was instead a spontaneous expression of genuine attraction and gratitude that surprised both of them. When they broke apart, the entire ballroom was silent, except for the sound of camera phones capturing what would undoubtedly become the most talked about moment in Dallas social history. Well, Emma said breathlessly, I guess we're not pretending anymore. Jake looked into her eyes and realized that somewhere during the evening's chaos and drama, his feelings for Emma had become completely real. Despite their different backgrounds and the impossible circumstances of their meeting, he had fallen for this brave, intelligent woman who was willing to give up her family's wealth and approval to pursue her own dreams. No, he said softly. I guess we're not. Charles Whitman was apoplectic. Emma, you are no longer my daughter. You're cut off from the family fortune, cut off from this family, and you'll regret this decision for the rest of your life. Maybe I will, Emma replied calmly. But at least it will be my life, not someone else's plan for what my life should be. The exodus that left them alone. As Charles Whitman stormed out of the ballroom, followed by most of the other guests, Emma and Jake found themselves standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, surrounded by abandoned champagne glasses and the ruins of what had been the social event of the Dallas season. So, Jake said, trying to process everything that had just happened, I guess I'm unemployed now. Emma laughed, despite everything. We both are. I just gave up my trust fund, my family, and any chance of financial support for law school. Are you regretting it already? Jake asked seriously. Emma considered the question carefully, looking around at the empty ballroom that represented everything she was walking away from. No, she said finally. For the first time in my life, I feel free. Terrified, but free. Jake took her hand. What happens now? I don't know. I have about $50,000 in my personal checking account, which should be enough to get started at Harvard if I live very modestly. After that, she shrugged. I guess I'll figure it out as I go. We'll figure it out, Jake corrected gently. Emma looked at him with surprise. Jake, you don't owe me anything. You did what I paid you to do, and more than I had any right to expect. You don't have to tie your life to mine just because we got caught up in the drama of tonight. The decision that would change 2 lives. Jake was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that Emma was giving up to pursue her dreams. Then he made a decision that surprised even himself. Emma, I've been working 3 jobs and living in a tiny apartment with 2 roommates for the past 4 years, trying to save enough money to finish college. I've never taken a real vacation, never bought anything that wasn't absolutely necessary, never done anything just because I wanted to instead of because I had to. What are you saying? I'm saying that meeting you has made me realize that there's more to life than just surviving and getting by. You're brave enough to give up everything you've ever known to pursue your dreams. Maybe it's time for me to be brave too. Jake pulled out his phone and quickly calculated numbers in his head. I have about $25,000 saved up from my jobs. If we combine our resources, we could both go to school, you at Harvard, me finishing my engineering degree at UT Dallas. We could be poor together instead of being poor separately. Emma stared at him in amazement. Jake, you barely know me. Why would you risk your financial security for someone you met 2 days ago? Because, Jake said, taking both of her hands in his, in 2 days, you've shown me more courage, intelligence, and integrity than most people show in a lifetime. And because I think I'm falling in love with you. The gamble that paid off. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized that this young man she had hired to solve a temporary problem was offering her something much more valuable than money or social status. He was offering her a real partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Are you sure? She asked. Because once we do this, there's no going back. My family will never forgive me, and you'll be associated with this scandal for the rest of your life. I'm sure, Jake said without hesitation. Besides, I've never been to Boston, and I hear the fall foliage is beautiful in Massachusetts. Emma laughed and kissed him again, this time not for the benefit of an audience or as part of an elaborate deception, but because she was genuinely happy for the first time in years. Okay, she said, let's do this. Let's be poor and in love and see what happens. As they walked out of the country club together, leaving behind the world of wealth and privilege that Emma had been born into, neither of them knew what the future would hold. But for the first time in their lives, they felt like they were in control of their own destinies rather than being controlled by other people's expectations and limitations. The struggles that tested their love. The next few months were the most difficult of both their lives. Emma's father had made good on his threat to cut off all financial support, and he had also used his influence to try to make life difficult for both Emma and Jake in various ways. Emma had to withdraw from Harvard Law School because she couldn't afford the tuition without her family's support. Instead, she enrolled at the University of Texas at Dallas School of Law, which was less prestigious, but much more affordable. Jake had to give up his apartment and move back in with his parents to save money, which was humiliating for a 22-year-old man, but necessary if they were going to survive financially while both attending school. They both worked multiple part-time jobs while carrying full course loads, studying together in the library until it closed every night, and living on a diet of ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. There were times when Emma wondered if she had made a terrible mistake by giving up her comfortable life, and times when Jake worried that he was holding Emma back from opportunities that someone with her intelligence and education should have had access to. The support that came from unexpected places. But just when things seemed most difficult, they began to receive help from sources they never could have anticipated. Jake's parents, despite their initial confusion about their son's relationship with a wealthy white woman from a completely different social class, welcomed Emma into their family with warmth and acceptance that she had never experienced in her own privileged upbringing. Mija, Jake's mother Maria, said to Emma one evening as they were preparing dinner together in the family's modest kitchen, "It doesn't matter where you come from or how much money your family has. What matters is that you make our son happy and that you're willing to work hard for the things you want in life." Emma also discovered that she had allies in places she had never expected. Several of her professors at UT Dallas, impressed by her intelligence and dedication despite her obvious financial struggles, helped her apply for scholarships and work-study programs that made law school much more affordable. Even more surprisingly, she began receiving anonymous donations that helped pay for textbooks, living expenses, and other costs associated with her education. She never found out who was providing this financial assistance, but she suspected it might be coming from family friends or distant relatives who disagreed with her father's decision to cut her off completely. The success that vindicated their choices. By their third year together, both Emma and Jake were thriving academically and personally. Emma was near the top of her law school class and had secured a summer internship at a civil rights organization in Austin. Jake had been accepted into a prestigious engineering graduate program and had received a full scholarship based on his undergraduate academic performance. Their relationship had also deepened and matured through the challenges they had faced together. They had learned to support each other through stress, disappointment, and uncertainty, and they had developed a partnership based on equality, mutual respect, and shared goals rather than on financial dependency or social expectations. "You know," Emma said one evening as they were studying together in their tiny shared apartment near the UT Dallas campus, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for everything that happened at that gala. Even the public humiliation and losing your family's support?" Jake asked. "Especially that," Emma replied seriously. "If none of that had happened, I would probably be married to Bradley right now, living in a mansion I didn't earn, spending my days planning charity luncheons and pretending to be happy with a life that had nothing to do with what I actually wanted." Jake looked up from his engineering textbooks. "Do you ever miss it? The money, the luxury, the social status?" "Sometimes," Emma admitted honestly. "It would be nice not to worry about paying rent or whether we can afford groceries. But I don't miss feeling like I was trapped in someone else's plan for my life." The proposal that surprised everyone. 2 years later, Jake graduated with his master's degree in engineering and accepted a job with a renewable energy company that offered him a good salary and opportunities for advancement. Emma was finishing her final year of law school and had already been offered a position with a nonprofit legal organization that represented low-income families in housing disputes. On the 4-year anniversary of the night they had met at the country club Gala, Jake took Emma back to the same venue where their relationship had begun in such dramatic fashion. But this time, instead of sneaking in as hired help and pretending to be someone he wasn't, Jake had made a reservation at the club's restaurant using his real name and paying with his own money. "This is surreal," Emma said as they sat at a table overlooking the same ballroom where their lives had been changed forever. "I can't believe we're back here." "I wanted to come back here because this place represents everything about our relationship," Jake explained. "It's where we met under false pretenses, where we discovered that we had real feelings for each other, and where we both decided to choose love over security." As Emma was trying to understand what Jake was getting at, he stood up from his chair and dropped to one knee beside their table, pulling out a small velvet box that contained a modest but beautiful diamond ring. "Emma Whitman," he said loudly enough that other diners in the restaurant began to take notice. 4 years ago, you hired me to pretend to be your boyfriend for one night. Tonight, I'm asking you to be my wife for the rest of our lives. The wedding that brought families together." Emma said yes immediately, and their engagement was celebrated not with a lavish party for hundreds of high society guests, but with a backyard barbecue at Jake's parents' house in Dallas, attended by family, friends, and classmates who had supported them through their years of struggle and growth. The wedding itself took place 6 months later in a small chapel in Austin, with Emma wearing a simple but elegant dress she had found at a consignment shop, and Jake wearing his father's best suit, which had been altered to fit him. Emma's family was not present at the ceremony, as her father had maintained his position that she was no longer his daughter and that he would not acknowledge her marriage to someone he considered beneath their social status. But to Emma's surprise and delight, several of her childhood friends and even some distant relatives attended the wedding, demonstrating that not everyone in her former social circle agreed with her father's harsh reaction to her choices. The most moving moment of the ceremony came when Jake's father, who had never spoken much English despite living in the United States for over 15 years, gave a toast in halting but heartfelt English about how proud he was to welcome Emma into their family and how much he admired her courage in choosing love over money. The careers that made a difference. 5 years after their wedding, both Emma and Jake had established successful careers that allowed them to make positive contributions to their community while also achieving financial stability and personal fulfillment. Jake had been promoted to senior engineer at his renewable energy company and was leading projects that brought solar and wind power to rural communities throughout Texas. His work was helping to create jobs in economically depressed areas while also addressing environmental concerns that were important to both him and Emma. Emma had become a partner at her nonprofit legal organization and had won several high-profile cases that protected low-income tenants from exploitation by wealthy landlords. Her work had also caught the attention of state politicians who were considering legislation to strengthen tenant rights throughout Texas. Their combined income allowed them to buy a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood in Dallas, start a small savings account for their future children, and begin contributing to charitable organizations that supported causes they cared about. But more importantly than their professional success, they had built a marriage based on equality, mutual support, and shared values that had grown stronger through the challenges they had faced together. The reconciliation that healed old wounds. 7 years after the night of the country club gala, Emma received an unexpected phone call that would test her ability to forgive and move forward from the pain of her father's rejection. Charles Whitman was in the hospital after suffering a serious heart attack, and Emma's mother was calling to ask her to come visit him because the doctors weren't sure he was going to survive. Emma's first instinct was to refuse. Her father had cut her out of his life completely, had never acknowledged her marriage or her achievements, and had made no effort to contact her, even when she had been featured in newspaper articles about her legal work on behalf of low-income families. But Jake encouraged her to go see her father, not for his sake, but for her own peace of mind and emotional healing. "You don't have to forgive him or pretend that everything is okay," Jake said as they drove to the hospital together. "But you might regret it later if you don't at least give him a chance to say whatever he needs to say." When Emma walked into her father's hospital room, she was shocked by how much older and frailer he looked than she remembered. The powerful, intimidating man who had controlled her life for so many years looked small and vulnerable, connected to medical equipment and IV tubes. The apology that changed everything. "Emma," Charles Whitman said weakly when he saw his daughter standing in the doorway, "I wasn't sure you would come." "I wasn't sure I would either," Emma replied honestly, taking a seat beside his hospital bed. They sat in awkward silence for several minutes before Charles finally spoke again. "I've been following your career," he said quietly. "I've read about your legal cases, your work helping people who can't afford good attorneys. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes despite her determination to remain emotionally detached from this conversation. "I was wrong," her father continued with obvious difficulty. "I was wrong to cut you off, wrong to try to control your life, wrong to treat Jake the way I did. I let my pride and my old-fashioned ideas about social class blind me to what was really important." "Why are you telling me this now?" Emma asked. "Because I might die, and because I realized that I'd rather have a daughter who is happy and successful in her own way than no daughter at all." Charles reached out and took Emma's hand with surprising strength. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I know I can't undo the damage I caused. But I want you to know that I love you. I'm proud of you, and I was a fool to let my prejudices destroy our relationship." The family reunion that healed years of pain. Emma's reconciliation with her father was gradual and complicated, but over the following months they began to rebuild their relationship on new terms that respected her independence and her choices. Charles Whitman also made an effort to get to know Jake as a person rather than judging him based on his social class and economic background. To his surprise, he discovered that Jake was intelligent, hard-working, and deeply committed to Emma's happiness and success. "I owe you an apology," Charles said to Jake during one of their family dinners 6 months after his heart attack. "I judged you unfairly based on stereotypes and prejudices that had nothing to do with your character or your worth as a person." Thank you for saying that," Jake replied graciously. "I know it's not easy to admit when you've made mistakes, especially public ones." Charles had also begun using his wealth and influence to support causes that were important to Emma and Jake, including scholarship programs for first-generation college students and legal aid organizations that served low-income communities. "I spent most of my life accumulating money and power," he told Emma during one of their conversations about his philanthropic activities. "But watching you and Jake build something meaningful together has taught me that the most important legacy isn't what you leave behind, but how you treat the people you love while you're still here. The children who bridge two worlds." 2 years after her father's heart attack, Emma and Jake welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Sophia in honor of Jake's grandmother who had helped raise him after his family immigrated to the United States. Sophia was born into a family that bridged two very different worlds: the blue-collar immigrant community where Jake had grown up and the wealthy Anglo society that Emma had been born into but had chosen to leave behind. Both sets of grandparents competed to spoil the little girl, but in very different ways. Jake's parents taught her Spanish songs and traditional Mexican recipes, while Emma's parents provided expensive toys and clothes, along with college savings accounts and trust funds that would ensure her future financial security. "She's going to grow up understanding both sides of the American dream," Emma observed as she watched her father playing with Sophia in his mansion's elaborate playroom, while speaking to her in the broken Spanish he had been learning specifically to communicate with his granddaughter. 3 years later, Emma and Jake had a son they named David, who inherited his father's analytical mind and his mother's determination to fight for justice and equality. Both children grew up understanding that wealth and privilege came with responsibilities to help others, and that success should be measured not just by personal achievements, but by positive contributions to society. The foundation that changed lives. As their family and careers continued to flourish, Emma and Jake decided to establish a nonprofit foundation that would address some of the systemic problems they had both experienced and witnessed throughout their lives. The Martinez-Whitman Foundation focused on 3 main areas: providing scholarships for first-generation college students, supporting legal aid organizations that served low-income communities, and creating job training programs for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation was funded partly through Emma's family wealth. Charles Whitman had insisted on contributing substantial amounts to his daughter's philanthropic efforts, and partly through Jake's success in the renewable energy industry, where he had eventually started his own consulting company that worked with rural communities to develop sustainable power systems. But more than just writing checks, both Emma and Jake remained actively involved in the foundation's work, spending weekends volunteering at job training programs and using their professional skills to help people navigate legal and technical challenges. "I think this is what my life was always supposed to be about," Emma said one Saturday afternoon as they were leaving a workshop where they had been teaching resume writing skills to teenagers from low-income families. "Not just achieving success for myself, but using whatever advantages I have to help other people achieve success too. The legacy that continues to grow." Today, 15 years after that dramatic night at the Dallas Country Club Gala, Emma and Jake have built a life that combines financial security with meaningful work, family happiness with social responsibility, and personal success with service to others. Emma is now a federal judge, appointed to the bench in recognition of her years of work advocating for civil rights and equal justice. Her legal career has been marked by landmark decisions that have expanded protections for low-income tenants, immigrant families, and other vulnerable populations. Jake has become one of the leading experts in renewable energy development in Texas, and his company has brought clean power to over 200 rural communities across the Southwest. His work has created thousands of jobs and helped reduce carbon emissions while providing affordable electricity to families who had previously struggled with high energy costs. Their foundation has now provided college scholarships to over 1,500 first-generation students, funded legal aid clinics in 12 Texas cities, and created job training programs that have helped more than 3,000 young people develop marketable skills and find stable employment. But perhaps their most important legacy is the example they have set for their children and their community about the possibility of building a life based on love, mutual respect, and service to others rather than on wealth, social status, or family connections. The anniversary that brought everything full circle. On the 15th anniversary of the night they met, Emma and Jake returned once again to the Dallas Country Club, where their love story had begun in such dramatic fashion. But this time, they weren't there as guests or employees. They were there as the featured speakers at a fundraising gala for their own foundation. The same ballroom where Emma had been disowned by her father and Jake had been publicly humiliated was now filled with people who had been helped by their foundation's programs, along with community leaders, business executives, and philanthropists who supported their work. 15 years ago, Emma said as she addressed the crowd from the same stage where her engagement to Bradley Ashford had been announced, "I stood in this room and made the scariest decision of my life, to choose love over security, authenticity over approval, and my own dreams over other people's expectations." She reached for Jake's hand as she continued her speech. "What I didn't know at the time was that making that choice wouldn't just change my life, It would give me a partner who would help me build something much more meaningful than anything I could have achieved on my own. Jake took the microphone and looked out at the audience, which included his parents, Emma's parents, their children, and dozens of young people who had received foundation scholarships. I came to this room 15 years ago as a hired actor, pretending to be someone I wasn't because I needed money to pay for college. Tonight, I'm here as myself, the son of Mexican immigrants, a first-generation college graduate, and someone who believes that every young person deserves the same opportunities that Emma and I were lucky enough to create for ourselves. The surprise that stunned everyone. As Emma and Jake were finishing their joint presentation about the foundation's work and future plans, Emma's father, Charles Whitman, approached the podium with a special announcement that surprised everyone in the room, including Emma and Jake. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles said, "I'd like to share some news about the Martinez-Whitman Foundation that I hope will inspire other families and businesses to think about their own legacy and impact on future generations." He pulled out a legal document and held it up for the audience to see. "Effective immediately, I am transferring 50% of my personal wealth, approximately $400 million, to the Martinez-Whitman Foundation to be used for expanding their scholarship programs, legal aid clinics, and job training initiatives throughout Texas and beyond." The audience erupted in applause and gasps of amazement. Emma stared at her father in shock, unable to believe what she had just heard. "But more importantly," Charles continued, "I want to publicly acknowledge something that I should have said 15 years ago. Jake Martinez is not just a good man and a loving husband to my daughter. He is the son-in-law I should have been proud to welcome into our family from the very beginning." He turned to face Jake directly. "I apologize for the prejudice and cruelty I showed you that night, and I thank you for loving my daughter enough to help her become the person she was always meant to be. The reconciliation that healed two families." As the gala ended and guests began to leave, the two families, the working-class Martinez family from East Dallas and the wealthy Whitman family from Highland Park, came together to celebrate not just the foundation's success, but also the healing of relationships that had been damaged by pride, prejudice, and misunderstanding. Jake's parents, who had initially been intimidated by Emma's wealthy background, had grown to love her like their own daughter and to appreciate the way she had embraced their family's values of hard work, loyalty, and service to others. Emma's parents, who had initially rejected Jake because of his social class and ethnicity, had come to respect him as a man of integrity and intelligence who had made their daughter happier and more fulfilled than she had ever been during her privileged but constrained youth. "You know," Maria Martinez said to Margaret Whitman, as they watched their children and grandchildren playing together in the country club's garden, "our kids taught us something important about what really matters in life." "What's that?" Margaret asked. "That love doesn't care about money or social status or what other people think. It only cares about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "I spent so many years worried about maintaining our family's reputation and social position that I almost lost my daughter completely. Now I realize that having a daughter who is happy and doing meaningful work is worth more than any amount of money or social status. The children who represent hope for the future." As Emma and Jake watched their children playing with cousins from both sides of their blended family, they reflected on how different their kids' lives would be compared to their own challenging early years. Sophia, now 13, was already showing signs of inheriting both her parents' social consciousness and her grandfather's business acumen. She had started a recycling program at her school and was using the proceeds to fund care packages for homeless families in Dallas. David, now 10, had inherited his father's analytical mind and was already talking about becoming an engineer like Jake so he could help solve environmental problems and create jobs for people in poor communities. Both children spoke fluent Spanish and English, understood both Mexican and Anglo-cultural traditions, and had been raised to see diversity and inclusion as strengths rather than obstacles to overcome. "They're going to grow up in a world that's very different from the one we grew up in," Emma observed as she watched Sophia teaching her younger cousin how to dance traditional Mexican folk dances, while David explained to his grandfather Charles how solar panels convert sunlight into electricity. Better or worse? Jake asked. Better, Emma said without hesitation. They'll face their own challenges, but they won't have to choose between their heritage and their dreams, or between love and security, the way we did. The business empire built on values. 5 years later, the Martinez Whitman Foundation had grown into one of the largest and most effective charitable organizations in the Southwest, operating programs in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California that had helped thousands of young people pursue higher education and build successful careers. Jake's renewable energy company had also expanded significantly, becoming a major player in the industry and employing over 500 people in good-paying jobs that supported families throughout the region. Emma's judicial career had led to her being mentioned as a potential candidate for the Texas Supreme Court, and her legal decisions had become models for other judges dealing with civil rights and economic justice issues. But perhaps most significantly, their success had inspired other wealthy families and business leaders to examine their own values and priorities, leading to increased philanthropic giving and support for programs that addressed inequality and promoted social mobility. "I think we've proven something important," Jake said during a family dinner celebrating the foundation's 10th anniversary. "We've shown that you can be financially successful while also being socially responsible, and that business success should be measured not just by profits, but by positive impact on communities and people's lives." Charles Whitman, now in his 70s but still actively involved in the foundation's work, nodded approvingly. "When I was younger, I thought success meant accumulating as much wealth and power as possible. Now I understand that real success means using whatever advantages you have to help other people achieve their dreams." The political influence that changed policies. As Emma's reputation as a fair and principled judge continued to grow, she was increasingly called upon to advise state legislators and policymakers about criminal justice reform, civil rights protection, and programs to address poverty and inequality. Her unique background, growing up wealthy but choosing to work with low-income communities, gave her credibility with people from all economic and social backgrounds, and her legal expertise made her an effective advocate for policy changes that could improve millions of lives. When the Texas legislature was considering a major expansion of funding for community colleges and job training programs, Emma testified before the Education Committee about the importance of creating pathways for economic mobility that didn't depend solely on four-year university degrees. "Not everyone needs to go to Harvard or MIT to have a successful and fulfilling career," she told the legislators. "But everyone deserves access to education and training that will allow them to support their families with dignity and contribute positively to their communities." The legislation passed with bipartisan support and created funding for programs that would serve over 100,000 students annually throughout Texas. The grandchildren who carry on the legacy. As Emma and Jake entered their 50s, they began to see their impact extending to a third generation, as their children started families of their own and continued the tradition of service and social responsibility that had defined their family for over 2 decades. Sophia, now a successful attorney specializing in immigration law, had married a fellow lawyer from El Paso and was raising bilingual children who understood both their Mexican heritage and their responsibility to use their privileges to help others. David had followed in his father's footsteps by becoming an engineer, but had specialized in water systems and was working with rural communities throughout Latin America to develop clean water infrastructure that could prevent disease and support economic development. Both of Emma and Jake's children had established their own charitable foundations focused on issues they cared about, and both were raising their children to understand that wealth and success came with obligations to serve others and work for social justice. "I think we did something right," Emma said as she watched her granddaughter teaching other children at a community center how to read, using the same patient and caring approach that Emma remembered from her own mother reading to her when she was small. "We didn't just build careers or accumulate wealth," Jake replied. "We built a family culture that values service over selfishness and community over individual achievement. That's a legacy that will last long after we're gone. The inspiration that changed a city." 20 years after that dramatic night at the country club, Emma and Jake's story had become legendary in Dallas, and served as inspiration for other young people who felt trapped by economic circumstances, family expectations, or social barriers that seemed insurmountable. The Martinez Whitman Foundation had grown into a national organization with programs in 20 states, and their model of combining immediate assistance with long-term support for education and career development had been adopted by foundations and government agencies throughout the United States. But perhaps their most important contribution was demonstrating that it was possible to bridge economic and cultural divides through genuine understanding, mutual respect, and shared commitment to helping others achieve their potential. Their annual scholarship gala had become one of Dallas's most important social events, but unlike the exclusive charity events that Emma had grown up attending, the Martinez Whitman Gala was specifically designed to bring together people from all economic backgrounds and celebrate the achievements of young people who were using their education and opportunities to make positive changes in their communities. "This is what Dallas can be at its best," Mayor Patricia Johnson said during her speech at the 20th anniversary gala. "A city where your family's wealth or social status matters less than your character and your willingness to work hard and help others succeed." The love story that inspired a generation. As Emma and Jake celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, surrounded by family members, foundation scholars, and community leaders whose lives had been touched by their work, they reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them together and the impact they had been able to have by choosing love over security and service over self-interest. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been desperate enough to hire a fake boyfriend?" Emma asked as they danced together at their anniversary party. "I think we would have found each other eventually," Jake replied. "Maybe not as dramatically, but I believe that people who are meant to be together will find a way to connect, even across differences in background or circumstances." Emma smiled and rested her head against Jake's shoulder as they continued dancing to the same song that had been playing during their first dance at the country club all those years ago. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too," Jake replied, "and I love the life we've built together, the family we've created, and the work we get to do helping other people build better lives for themselves. The legacy that will endure forever." Today, as Emma and Jake look back on more than 2 decades of marriage, parenthood, and shared service to their community, they can see that their decision to choose love over convention has created ripple effects that extend far beyond their own lives and happiness. The thousands of young people who have received Martinez Whitman Foundation scholarships are now doctors, teachers, engineers, lawyers, and business leaders who are making their own positive contributions to society and raising children who understand the importance of service and compassion. The legal aid clinics funded by their foundation have helped tens of thousands of low-income families fight eviction, navigate immigration processes, and protect their rights when faced with discrimination or exploitation. The job training programs have provided career opportunities for people who had been written off by society, giving them the skills and confidence needed to support their families with dignity and build stable, productive lives. But beyond the measurable impact of their philanthropic work, Emma and Jake's story has become a powerful example of how love can overcome prejudice, how courage can triumph over fear, and how two people from very different backgrounds can create something beautiful and meaningful together when they share common values and genuine commitment to each other's growth and happiness. Their love story, which began with deception and desperation, evolved into a partnership based on truth, trust, and shared purpose that continues to inspire others to believe that it's possible to build a life based on authenticity rather than appearances, service rather than selfishness, and love rather than fear. In a world where economic inequality continues to grow and cultural divisions seem increasingly insurmountable, the Martinez Whitman family represents hope that bridges can be built, barriers can be overcome, and love really can conquer all when it's combined with courage, hard work, and dedication to helping others achieve their dreams. And in the end, that may be the most important legacy of all, proof that two people who choose to love each other despite their differences can change not just their own lives, but the lives of thousands of others, and leave the world a little bit better than they found it. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.